bachelor on a budget. For this episode, we're going to be making one of my favorite meals, chicken parmesan. So a few things you're going to need for this are, for the sauce, I have some fresh tomatoes, some tomato paste, garlic, shallots, fresh onions work also, white onions, red onions, yellow, whatever you got. I have some basil, rosemary, oregano, and some red pepper flakes, and some salt, of course. Now for the pasta, you're just going to need some eggs, some flour, some water, and some salt. And then for the chicken, you just need chicken, flour, breadcrumbs, and then the same seasonings from before. So stick around, we'll show you how it's done. Woo! Chopping the shallot up has me crying harder than a Tampa Bay Lightning fan. Alright guys, first thing we're going to do is start working on some sauce, because that's going to take the longest, about an hour from start to finish. And by the time the sauce is finished, everything else should be just about ready to roll also. So what I've done is I've started by mincing up this shallot and this garlic, and I'm just going to take my good old trusty pastry cutter here and just scrape it all up on here. Now I have a pot of oil, just a couple tablespoons of oil going here, and I'm just going to drop it in and let that go for about, I'd say about 2 or 3 minutes. And then in about 2 or 3 minutes we'll sweat that out a little bit and let those flavors develop, and then we'll add this garlic in. Now in the meantime, we have a fresh tomato here, and I just have a regular potato peeler, or vegetable peeler, and I just get in there and dig the middle out with my potato peeler. And I start with my knife and just make a nice X cut in the top. And now this is the next level maneuver. This is what you're going to want to do, is take your tomato, drop it into some boiling water, and once it's been boiling for about 2 or 3 minutes, you can take it out of the water and drop it into an ice bath. Now what this is going to do is it's going to shock the tomatoes right out of the skin. And you're going to want to let that sit in there for about 30 seconds or so, because those tomatoes are going to be really hot. But once they've been sitting in there for just a minute, you can reach in, grab a tomato, and you just peel the skin right off of that tomato. And that's the easiest way to get it off. And you just do that for about 6 tomatoes. Out the top. See? So the onions and the garlic have been sauteing in here for a few minutes. Now what I'm going to do is take our dried spices, starting with the oregano, starting with some rosemary, and some red pepper flakes. I'm just going to throw in about a tablespoon of each. So we're going to let that go for just a couple of minutes. And then what we're going to do is come over to our cutting board, and you can see we've taken the skins off of our tomatoes successfully. And you're just going to take a big ass knife and cut into these. Just give them a good rough chop. And the reason why is we're going to use our stick blender, and we're going to kind of ground this down into a manageable sauce once the tomatoes have sauteed a little bit, and once the tomatoes have released a lot of their juices. Now you don't have to use a stick blender, you can use whatever blender you like. If you have a Vitamix, or if you have just a regular blender, or whatever you have, but I have a stick blender and I find that it works really, really well. So you can see I have my dried spices and my shallots here in my pot. I'm just going to use the same pastry cutter as before, and kind of in batches, just take it and drop it into my pot here. Now we're just going to take this and give this a good mix up. Mix all the ingredients in together. Now we're going to take this and put it on a medium heat, I'd say about a 4.5, maybe a 5, and just kind of let it simmer really low for, I'd say about a half hour. And then we're going to come back with our stick blender and really grind up all those tomato pieces and make a nice smooth sauce out of it. I didn't show it in the last shot, but I spilled red pepper flakes all over my kitchen floor. That was fun to clean up. Alright guys, so we have about 2 cups of sifted flour, about a tablespoon of olive oil, and a couple pinches of salt, and we kind of put it all together here on the countertop. And we whisked in some egg, and you just kind of throw that in there in your crater, and just work it with our hands. And this is how we're going to make our fresh pasta. Now this is nothing earth-shattering, right? I mean, we did this in our first video. We know how to make fresh pasta by now. But I'm going to show you kind of something that's going to up your game here in a little bit. So the first thing that we want to do is, just like the first episode, we're going to take this and knead it into a ball. And don't worry if it looks kind of dry and scraggly at first, you just got to work all of those eggs in. I've got about a 1/4 cup of water on standby for this part too, just in case we need to kind of bring everything together and the eggs don't give us enough moisture to make this into a kneadable ball. I should also mention that it's at this point that you want to take your chicken out and let your chicken rest, because you don't want to cook chicken from stone cold. You want it to kind of sit at room temperature for about 15 or 20 minutes. And the reason why is because cold chicken will kind of get dry in the center when you cook it, when it's finally done on the outside, and that's not what you want. Now what you want to do is knead your ball until it's nice and smooth and it looks a little bit like this. You just kind of give it a couple good twists until it's kind of ball shaped. Then you take a piece of cling film and you just kind of grab onto it like this and wrap it up and let all the air out until it's wrapped up nice and tight. Then you can stick it in your drawer, just let it sit on the counter and let it rest for about 30 minutes. Then I'm going to show you how to take your pasta up to the next level. Alright guys, now it's time to take our stick blender and blend this all up. So what I'm going to do is just take my stick blender here and give it a nice good blend. And you can see after about a minute or so of blending, everything's taken on a pretty nice, uniform, smooth, even consistency. And that's what I'm going for. I'm going to throw the lid back on and let it simmer for about another half hour or so until the chicken's done. And then we'll put it all together and show you what it looks like on the plate. Alright, now for the chicken, we're going to come back to the same big ass knife we had earlier. And we're going to flatten out this chicken as much as we can with our hand. You can see that I've trimmed a lot of the fat and a lot of the excess pieces off. And you just keep your hand flat on the top. And you take your knife and make it nice and parallel with the cutting board. Nice and flat. And you can go slow. Don't cut yourself. Do this nice and easy. And you want to make sure you keep your knife nice and parallel with the cutting board. Otherwise you'll get a pretty uneven cut. So keep it as parallel with the cutting board as you can. And you should get 2 decent pieces of chicken out of it. Well, that's not my best attempt. Now, I could have done a better job keeping my knife parallel with the cutting board, but you know, work with what you got. You know, maybe one piece is bigger for someone who has a bigger appetite like me, and another piece is smaller for someone who doesn't. And you just do this in a 3-step process. You just go flour, egg wash, and then breadcrumbs. Now with the breadcrumbs, I've put in some of our fresh basil in there. I've also grated up a little bit of mozzarella. And you just want to take this and press it as much as you can into, because you want to get all those little bits and pieces into the nooks and crannies of the chicken. And then shake off any excess. Now for the cast iron, we have this going on about medium-low heat, about a 4. And I've got a couple tablespoons of olive oil in there. And we're going to take our chicken and just take it and lay it down away from you. And you definitely want to hear that sizzle. That means your pan's hot enough. And then take both pieces and just lay them away from you. And then cook them on each side for about 3 minutes. And one thing that I like to do when there's only about a minute left is take a couple of tablespoons of butter and just kind of drop them into your cast iron, somewhere where it's going to make contact with the chicken. And then let those melt down. And this is going to give us a nice brown, kind of caramely crust a little bit on the chicken. And then after your 3-minute timer is up, you can use tongs, you can use a fork, whatever you have on hand. And just take your chicken and flip it. And we're only going to flip this once. One flip is more than enough. Or it's actually exactly enough. Take it and give it a good shake so your butter gets all over again. Ooh, careful. The handle of your cast iron's hot also. In case you're wondering. And then we're going to give this about 2 to 3 minutes on this side also. Now once your second 2 or 3 minute timer is up, we're going to take this whole cast iron and throw it in the oven. But first, I've got a little ladle of our sauce that we have going in the pot right next door. And I'm just going to give it a quick ladle on top. Now, I say ladle, but I just have a measuring cup because I don't actually own a ladle. And I'm going to take a few slices of this mozzarella and just kind of lay it across. And a good indication of when this chicken is done is when this mozzarella gets nice and brown and bubbly and caramely. Now, this whole time I've been promising you all a next level way to cook your pasta, and here it is. So in the first video, we've just taken our pasta and we rolled it out and kind of rolled it over with a knife, right? Well, a couple of years ago, I invested in this pasta machine. It cost me about $25 3 years ago, and it just takes your pasta to the next level. It even comes with this nice little C-clamp type device, and you're just going to use this and fasten it to your countertop. So I've taken our pasta from before and divided it into thirds, and you definitely want to get some good flouring on both sides so it doesn't stick to your pasta machine. And you start with the widest setting, and make sure you kind of roll your pasta out into a little flat disc or like an oval like this. And then you just slowly turn the crank. And you can use one hand to turn the crank and one hand to kind of pull the pasta through. Once you've worked it through once or twice, you want to take your pasta and kind of fold it into thirds and flatten it all out again. And keep it on the widest setting. This kind of increases the strength of your pasta. And then once you've rolled it through on the widest settings a couple of times, give it a quick flour. Keep your countertop nice and floured for this part. And then just turn it down a setting. So after the pasta gets to a certain length, after the first pass or two, just give it a good rip in half. Right with your hands. This isn't a precise noodle measurement or anything like that. And then you just take it and you feed your new end through. And you can see that with every pass it's getting a little bit thinner. It's getting a little bit longer. And my pasta machine has about 7 or 8 settings. I'm going to take it to about the 3rd lowest setting. This is going to kind of give us a thin pasta noodle, but it's not going to be razor thin. And then you have attachments. Mine came with this one, which was great. And then you just take the attachment and slide it right on. And I have a couple of different noodle width options on this. And you definitely want to flour this part too, because this is where noodles can get stuck. And you just take it and kind of feed it through. If it's not noisy, you're not doing it right. And now you just have this perfect angel hair pasta that works great with chicken Parmesan. And now you definitely want to flour each noodle and give it a nice toss and flour. Because if you don't, everything's going to kind of clump together and make one big noodle lump ball like before. It's worth mentioning that exactly 5 minutes before you're ready to eat, you want to take the lid off of your pasta and throw in your fresh basil. Now, fresh herbs don't take nearly as long to develop their flavor as dried herbs do. So I've torn up about 6 leaves of basil and mix it into my sauce. And I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes. And then we're going to start on our pasta and it'll be time to eat. The thing you should know about fresh pasta versus box pasta is that fresh pasta doesn't take nearly as long to cook as box pasta does. Fresh pasta only needs about 2 or 3 minutes to be that perfect al dente. Now when you put the pasta into the water, it is going to reduce the temperature of the water a little bit, so you may see it stop boiling pretty quickly like mine did. But it should pick up the simmer and pick up the boil pretty quickly right away again. And you still only need about 2 or 3 minutes. Even if it's just sitting here in the water like this, you can see that the boil is already picking back up. So I'm only going to give it about 2 minutes in the water. I've seasoned it with some olive oil and some water, and I'm just going to give it about 2 minutes. And I'm working in batches here. I did about half the pasta at first, and I'm going to do a second batch of the pasta again, because I have a lot of pasta. You can see that the pasta is done now, and I've had it draining from this sieve into the pot, our old trusty sieve here. So I'm going to take just a little bit of this olive oil and drizzle it all over, and lose the cap. Take a little bit of this fresh basil, and then take just a little bit of this sauce that I've reserved for the side, and mix it all in together. And then we're just going to give it a quick kind of twist together. Alright guys, and that's how it's done. Homemade pasta with homemade sauce, and turn it into some chicken Parmesan. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, maybe leave a comment, maybe subscribe, tell your friends about it, and we'll see you next time.